And so our son and his wife are on staff at Medical Lake Redemption Church in Medical Lake, Washington, which is near Spokane. And he's creative arts and youth pastor there. So, and this is Marcus. Marcus, скажи привет. So, yeah, he speaks Russian. And Marcus turns 2 shortly. And Natasha has not been eating watermelon, but January 5, yeah. So we're super happy to have them with us this weekend. Thanks, guys. So, I know. I was just supposed to have them stand, but you know, you might not see just how cute they are. It's so great that when we come to church, God does things like the word faith this morning. I just really hear him giving us that word. And that's been a prayer that I've had. We've been here in Walla Walla over a year now, and that's something I've been praying for each of you regularly, that your faith would rise up, that you would believe that God can do it, that you can trust him, that you can lean into him, and he won't let you down. So this morning I really feel it, and I feel it in the way that, like, maybe you don't know this, but every Sunday, the leadership team from this church has chosen to take a portion of the money that goes into the offering, and they send it to ministries here in Walla Walla, like Birthright Center that we mentioned already today, and they also send it all over the world. And we send it to people that are serving in places, in various ministries, human trafficking, kids stuff, Bible education, all sorts of things. And this morning, it's really a great privilege for us to get to kind of have the window open for us, and we get to lean out the window. I remember one time I got to go to Paris. Thank you, honey. And we booked a room that said it had a view of the Eiffel Tower. But the only way you could really see the Eiffel Tower was to open the window, lean out, and look this way. And there it was down there. This morning, I hope we don't have to lean out. I don't think we will be, because our guest is Nancy Valnes. And Nancy Valnes has years and years of ministry around the world. And I trust that she's going to open the window wide for us here at First Assembly. And we're going to see by faith what God has been doing and what he wants to do through her ministry in Russia. Thank you, Nancy, for being with us. It's great to have you. Great to have you.
Thank you. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Jill. It's really a pleasure to be here this morning. We had a good time in Sunday school. What do we say? Not Sunday school. Gathering group. We had and we were pretty open in gathering group this morning. We opened a window to a lot of things. I'm an HIV educator, you can imagine. But important stuff. So anyway, I'm very pleased to be here with you, and it's so fun to be here with Terrence and Jill and their kids. You know, we became missionaries at just about the same time, the early 90s, 91. And, you know, I was in Africa for many years, and most recently I've been in Russia, and you guys were in Russia, and, you know, we never connected on the field. And here I am with you today in one of my favorite churches in the entire world, in one of my favorite towns. I tell you, I love Walla Walla. I love Walla Walla. Well, like, you don't like it or what? Like, woo, give it up, Walla Walla, woo! Okay, whatever. I like it here. And it's good to see the Coopers, and it's just good to see so many friends from the past. And Harriet Filan, I see you back there. Hello, dear. Do you know, I attended this church 30 years ago. Yeah, I'm just going to give you a little bit of my background. And I'm going to do this because it kind of helps make sense of, and I had such a wonderful stay with Chuck and Sherry Lynn last night. Good food. Have you ever had any of her food? I know you have, haven't you? Nice stuff. Good pans. And muffins in those little things were really good this morning, too. But so you can understand how I got here and why I call myself an HIV educator. That's kind of a vague term, but I'm from a Christian family in Bremerton, Washington, and I felt the Lord calling me to missions when I was 16 years old in 1980. And in order to be a missionary, I knew that I needed to go to Bible school, and I went to Bible school, and then I just wanted to have another thing to offer on the mission field. So I went to nursing school, and I became a registered nurse. And I graduated from nursing school in 1987 and moved here to Walla Walla. And I had my first nursing job at General, and I guess has closed recently. But I liked that. I liked that hospital, and I lived in the Whitman downtown in the hotel, and you would park out front, and then to get back into the apartments, you'd have to walk in the front door and then cut through the restaurant. And I had on my little white nursing uniform, because you used to wear little white nursing uniforms. I don't think you wear those anymore, but I would wear my little white nursing uniform and would walk through the restaurant to get up to my apartment, and I just felt like I was so cool, you know. I used to love the show That Girl, Marlo Thomas, and she had the really cool boyfriend Donald, and I thought that would be really cool. Do you remember That Girl? Yeah, That Girl. And so when I moved to that apartment, it was just so fun, and I felt very grown up at 23, and I loved coming to church here, and I loved working at the hospital. It was just a good time. It was really it was a good year for me. It was only a year. I mean, you know, when you look back on things, you get older and you look back on like periods of time, and at the time it seemed like it was forever, and then I look now and think that was a year. That really wasn't that long, but in my memory it was a long time, and it was a good time. But the Lord had put a very specific burden on my heart to go to Africa. So in 1988, I was here in the church, and missionaries were here. It was a Sunday night, I was sitting in the congregation, and the Langfords, they were just, you know, missionaries home on furlough like I am right now, and they were speaking, and, you know, I had heard them at my home church before I knew who they were, but I was like, okay, Nancy, you just gotta get in gear. And so I had my education down, I had a little bit of experience in the hospital, and I applied to do a short-term missions thing for a year in South America. So I actually went to South America from this church, was down there just for a year, and came back and went back to Bremerton. And I just knew that I had to get back. I had to get to Africa. So to make a long story really short, I ended up in Africa for 15 years. When I was preparing to go, you know, we can be kind of idealistic all through life, right? Being idealistic is not just a characteristic of the young. All of us, no matter our age, we can be very idealistic. And I don't think that I was anticipating my ministry in an idealistic way. I knew the realities. I had been through a couple of real rough experiences in South America. But, you know, it's just good to move forward with anticipation, right? Why get worked up over the stuff that you can't control? You know, we talked about this in gathering group this morning. We don't know the future. We don't know the future. We just step forward. You just have to move your feet. And I am going to bring a scriptural underpinning to this message this morning. And I've been thinking a lot about Abraham. Abraham was really quite his character, like the character of Abraham, who he was as a man. He was a pretty solid guy, you know, and there's a lot that we can learn from his example. So I was thinking about Abraham as the father of faith. Abraham is the father of faith, and we see in Genesis chapter 12 the call of Abraham, and this was like the original call, right? Up to this time, you had a bunch of people wandering around the face of the earth, not so many as we are now, but they were just, you know, doing their thing, and, you know, they were created by God, and man fell, you know, original sin and all of this, and God just chose Abraham God chose to invest himself in Abraham. It was like a pretty big deal, right? I mean, how could words even communicate that? God, the creator of the universe, decided to invest himself, or had it ordained. I mean, it happened that he was going to reveal his character through one of these humans down here on the earth. Like with his feet of clay. He just had feet of clay. We all just have feet of clay, right? But Abraham was open to it. So here he was, wandering around the desert with his family, and God just spoke to him, and, well, here we'll read it, because this is a scriptural underpinning. This is not an official sermon. So I know that I'm supposed to do it like homiletically and hermeneutically correct, so I'm just, this is not an official sermon. This is a scriptural underpinning, but it will go along with what I'm saying. So in Genesis chapter 12, just, Abraham, his family, they're just out there in the desert. And the Lord had said to Abraham, leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse, and all the peoples of the earth will be blessed through you. I mean, Abraham was just a guy. Abram. He was just a guy. He had feet of clay, but he was open to possibilities. He was open to possibilities. He wasn't afraid to move his feet. And that's some of our problem today. We don't want to move our feet. The new opportunities are scary. So anyway, Abraham moved his feet, and we're here now because of Abraham's obedience. Well, and he didn't know what he was getting into, right? He didn't know. He's like, okay, I'll do it. And he just stepped forward, and, there you have it. And so for me, as I was getting ready to go to Africa, I really didn't know what I was going to find there. Idealistically, you thought you're going to do this and this. You can't anticipate the future, but I thought of maybe doing this. And so I got to Africa, and I found not only the Rwandan genocide, which was my introduction to Africa, was 4 months on the Rwandan border during the genocide. Certainly could not have anticipated that. And then I got back to the mission station, because it was in the middle of the jungle. At 16, I said I was going to go to deepest, darkest Africa. And so where do I end up one morning? Woke up, here I am in deepest, darkest Africa. I was in Isiro, Zaire, a matter of a couple hundred kilometers from the geographic center of the continent of Africa. That was like pretty much deepest, darkest Africa. God got me there because I moved my feet. So went through the genocide and got up to the old mission station type thing. And found HIV. I found people that had HIV. It was in the early 90s, and HIV had only been on the world screen for, 11 years, 12, 13 years, like that. It was first diagnosed in 81. I felt called to missions in 1980 before HIV had even reared its ugly head. 1980, God called me. 81, it was observed. AIDS was observed as a disease, and in 83, it was identified that HIV was the virus that caused the disease of AIDS. And God, even before that epidemic popped up, God knew, in the way he sees things, that he was going to be leading me down this path into the epidemic. So I got there and found people with HIV, and in the middle of the jungle, there's not a lot of communication, like none, but I knew what needed to be done, and just put together information on how to prevent HIV infection, which is a huge subject. You can imagine, not a lot of pharmacies in deepest, darkest Africa, resources, nothing, no medication, and people just were dying left and right. And it was a hard time, but I knew that the Lord had taken me there for a specific time, for a specific purpose. That time in Zaire came to an end because there's like civil war and all that, and so we had to evacuate that country, and I went on to spend another 9 years in the country of Burkina Faso. Again, HIV there. It was continuing to spread, and I firmly believe that the church has to respond to this. In Sunday school, we talked about this. We don't talk about things, right? Because we're embarrassed, because we're uncomfortable. But when we don't talk about it, it stays in the darkness. And who lurks in the darkness but the enemy of our soul? And who has the light? We have the light. Light exposes darkness. So we can rest here in our embarrassment and think, oh no, this is embarrassing. I can't talk about sex with my kids. I can't do this. I understand that, but what is happening to our globe? So, and believe me, in Africa, they did not want to talk about it either. But there were people who did understand this, and people that I connected with and who worked with me and taught me things and came alongside of me as I developed the teaching stuff and allowed me opportunities out into the churches and communities. And so I just talked about prevention and obeying God's plan for sexuality, and that's the nurse hat on me, right? Really, the prevention part is the pastor hat for me. The pastor. Like, my ministry platform is sexuality. Like, who would have thought that in 1980? Like, that was a very unlikely subject for a single woman. I've never been married. So, anyway, I said I would do it, and I was open to the opportunity, right? Be open to opportunity. Be open to new things, because you don't know how the Lord is going to lead you. So, did that for the 15 years in Africa, and it was really good experience, but I really burned out, as you can imagine, because seriously, everybody died. It was really hard, but it was really good ministry, and people come to Jesus Christ on that kind of ministry platform. Because when you talk about this subject, when you talk about sexuality, it really is so close to our hearts, right? It's so much a part of who we are that when we talk about it, it can't help but stir your soul. Really, it exposes sin. Oh, there's that word, sin. But that's what it does. It exposes sin. But also blessing. I mean, we shouldn't be so shamefaced about it. It's like, oh, sin, sin. But in the perfect context, it's the most wonderful, beautiful thing that God has created. So anyway, it's a good ministry platform, and a lot of people came to Christ, and a lot of people recommitted their lives to Christ, and a lot of dying people were helped and accompanied to death by Christians who weren't afraid to be around them. Because HIV doesn't just spread, here and there. It's very specific routes of transmission. It's mother to child, blood transmission, and sexual transmission. So it's not in mucus, it's not in saliva, it's nothing. It's not airborne. And people realized that, and they loved the people who were dying. And you reduce the stigma, and people responded to their needs. So instead of, when someone died, wrapping them in a mat and digging a hole and dropping them in the earth, they started having funerals for people. Because that wasn't happening. Someone would die from AIDS and the church wouldn't have a funeral because of all this judgment and just really a lack of understanding of the physical principles and also the spiritual principles. So it was good ministry, but I was burned out, and I wanted to get back overseas. So then I traveled for like 5 years internationally after I left Africa, stayed with the Assemblies of God World Missions and traveled. And during my travels, I was able to go to Russia, and I loved it. Well, I mean, like you guys, do you really love Russia? I mean, you love it, but I've always said that it's kind of an acquired taste. Yeah, согласна, yeah. It's an acquired taste because Russians are very different from Americans. But just because something is different doesn't make it wrong. It just makes you change the way you look at things, right? So we think that we have all the right ways of doing things. We think that a nice person in America, okay, I'm tossing this out to you. Like, if you meet someone and after you meet that person you say, oh, they're so nice, what do they do that makes you think that they're nice? Smile. Like Americans are so nice and smiley. It's like, hey, how you doing? So good to see you. Hey, how are you doing? You look great. Hey, hi. Smiley, smiley. Okay, I don't want to make a blanket statement for a country that stretches 11 time zones. Okay, you can't really make a blanket statement for that, but I think it would be safe to say that a smiling person is not interpreted as nice in Russia. They'll look at you like you are crazy, right? Out in public, if you don't know a person. And I had people in St. Petersburg say, again, I have to contextualize it to where I was because it is 11 time zones. But people say, if you are walking through the streets smiling randomly, people will either think there's something wrong with you, you're crazy, there's something wrong with them, and you're laughing at them, or you're in love. Did you hear this? Is this the things that, like kids, Michigan kids, we have it? So it's different. It's different. But I really came to love Russians. And my context in Russia of ministry is working in alcohol and drug rehab centers. And I love these people. I love these people because they're not hiding anything. Like if you're working with a former prostitute, you're just basically saying anything you need to say. You know, you're not trying to hide reality. You're not trying to hide reality from an addict. Well, maybe there are elements of hiding reality, but it's pretty earthy stuff. You know what I'm saying? Rehab ministry is very, very earthy stuff. And when I got to Russia, I knew because I had been there and had worked in rehab centers for a couple of months, I had some connections. So when I got to Russia, I just was able to kind of step into some of those relationships. And wow, I never would have dreamt that. I never would have dreamt that. You know, in 1980, yes, Lord, I'll be a missionary. I go to Africa. I move here in 1988. You know, I go to Africa in the early 90s. And then I find myself in Russia. Like, whoever would have thought of that? And you just don't know the paths that God is going to lead you down if, like Abraham, you are willing to be open to new possibilities. Be open to new possibilities. And I'm so excited that you guys have the halls here. They're awesome. Give it up for the halls. Yeah. Another great example of being open to new possibilities, you know. So, so had a good time in Russia and, you know, studied Russian for a long time, like a long time. Russian is hard. Okay, I speak French. Moi, je parle français, n'est-ce pas? Voilà, tout à fait. Now, you try to get me to just roll Russian off my tongue, it doesn't quite come like that. Я говорю по-русски. I mean, I'm good in grammar. I love grammar. I love grammar. I am such a weirdo. Okay, I'm just going to share something with you, and I know that this is going to sound weird. And it is very, very weird. A couple of weeks after I got to Russia, I found out I had breast cancer. So I went through breast cancer. I actually went through it in France, in Paris is where my hospital was, because it's just a lot cheaper there. Wow, a lot cheaper and excellent health care. And I didn't want to go home because I wouldn't have anybody here to really take care of me. So anyway, I just stayed in Paris and went through stuff there. And as a result of that, I had 3 surgeries, and I had to have a lot of downtime because a lot of public transportation. And I'm telling you, you don't want to be wandering the metro system in Russia after surgery. I had 3 surgeries. And as a result, I was apartment bound for months and months and months. And you know what I did? I studied Russian. It was so fun. I have piles and piles of books of Russian grammar. But as a result, I have like this really deep knowledge of Russian grammar. And now on the way over here, I was listening to podcasts. Remind me to tell you about these Russian podcasts. Be great for your language, remember. Okay, listening to podcasts in Russian. And even though I don't understand all of the words, I understand the constructions. I understand Russian language constructions. You know what? I never would have acquired that knowledge if I wouldn't have had breast cancer. See, so again, nobody wants to go through cancer. Cancer's a drag. But, I'm not always looking for the, what is the rosy glasses or silver underlining or whatever that is. Silver lining. Oh, man. But there is the thing. God will never take us down roads without giving us the grace to manage those roads. And a lot of it just depends on who we are. And are we willing to trust him? Are we willing to move our feet? Are we willing to maybe accept circumstances that are not our choice? Life happens. Stuff happens. How do we adapt? And a lot of these bad things that seem bad will actually have their silver lining as we trust God. And then even the painful stuff, you eventually, I don't know, that's a whole other topic, of course. But so I got Russian language, and I never would have seen that coming. I don't even know where I'm going with this because this was a totally random bunny trail. So these 4 years in Russia was great, and I had to come home for furlough, because that's what we do. Some of these God missionaries were on the field for 4 years, and then we come home for a year, and we do the fundraising thing in churches. And I'm planning on going back to Russia, but really, it's a little tricky now. Russia's always been a tricky place, and they don't really want the evangelical church to grow. I think that's a good statement. If you look at the tensions that, some of the religious tensions that we're having in Russia as some of these God missionaries, or even as Protestant missionaries, or Protestant believers, the Russian Orthodox Church is strong, and I feel like it's truth. I mean, truth is present in the Orthodox Church. Is present in the Orthodox Church. But I had someone in a rehab center tell me, it was interesting. They said that in the Orthodox Church, there's not a moment of conversion as such, because they're believing correctly. So you can believe correctly and be a believer. You believe. That's why. You believe. You're a believer. But he said, I never had a moment of conversion, because we were just taught to believe right, and to do things, but there wasn't a moment of conversion. And he was saying how when he came into the church rehab center, that he had this moment of conversion. And he said, I converted, and even though I grew up in the church, there was not a moment of conversion. When I came here, I repented of my sins. And I turned, and I'm going in a different direction. I'm walking away from my addictions, and the Holy Spirit lives in me and is helping me to move further and further away from my addictions. Well, that's why those rehab centers are so successful. It's because people convert. It's like a powerful conversion. You leave your old life, you walk away from your old life, and you step into a new life, and the further you go, the further you move away from your old life. And there's moments where you fall, you transgress, you move back, but then you keep moving forward, because that's what the grace of God does. He helps us to move forward. And so I was able to be in those rehab centers, but they're making it really difficult to get the religious visa, the type of visa that a person would need to do ministry in Russia. I don't know what is going to happen. I am planning on going back to Russia. I spent the last 4 years in the city of St. Petersburg, which was just like an amazingly beautiful city, but I don't think that I'll be going back there. I know I won't be going back there. So you can pray with me. Pray with me, will you, that the Lord would open the exact right door, because I'm open to the opportunity, right? I'm open to it. I want to see what he has coming up for me. I don't want to have the feet of clay that get stuck. I want to keep moving forward, and I want the Lord to lead me into the right place, and I want him to bless Russia, and I want him to use me to minister to Russian people who are at risk for HIV infection through the use of IV drugs. I want him to take me to that place. I want him to connect me with those people. I want him to give me the words that I need to speak to a Russian prostitute in the center, a drug user, a woman who sells her body to obtain drugs so she could keep doing the same thing, the vicious cycle of that. I want the Lord to give me the words. I want him to take me to the exact right place that he has prepared for me and that he has prepared for the people he's going to connect me with. I want to be open to that. And it's exciting. It's an exciting thought. And, you know, as I close, I just would encourage all of you to not be afraid of possibilities, and not be afraid to move your feet of clay, and to know that God has a really specific purpose for you wherever you are. God has a very specific purpose for you because he has called us to be his people. Can you imagine this church, part of the body of Christ, all across this globe this morning, all across this globe for 24 hours that consist of a Sunday? Across the globe, people are meeting in churches like this. Not like this. Some of them are in churches like this. Some of them are in storefronts in Russia. Some of them are in mud structures in Africa. People, I mean, who can even imagine the church, what it looks like across the globe, and the songs that they sing? But the same Spirit is present across this globe. The same Spirit. The Spirit of the living Savior lives in his church. We are the church. He has set us apart to be holy, so we will be different. We are set apart. And you know what? When the world sees that you're different, when you reflect the nature of the Creator God, wow, people are drawn to that. That's why we're holy. That is why we're holy. That's why God calls us to holiness, so we can be an example to the world around us. And, you know, maybe you're not an upfront person. Maybe it's really scary for you to even think about witnessing. I know how scary that is. I'm going to tell you, I am not an evangelist. I'm not. I speak the truth. I'm an upfront person. And you know what? It's kind of uncomfortable for me to say to someone that I don't know, so you do know Jesus? Some people have that gift, right? Yeah, people have a gift of evangelism. I don't. And I accept that. I have other strengths, and may God help me to, you know, further those strengths in him. And it reaches a person at a certain place in their journey. So even if you're not the evangelist, live a holy life. Live a holy life. Find out what the Bible says about holiness. And as we said in Sunday school, it's not just about sex. It's about justice. 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 When people see that the church is just, it is the opposite of the world. And the glory of God is reflected in your life, and people are drawn to that. There are a lot of ways to be holy. There are a lot of ways to be a shining light. It's not just with your words, and sometimes it is. But there's a lot to be done. There's a lot to be done. And in thinking of Abraham, you know, he wasn't afraid to listen. He wasn't afraid to move. And as I close, I just want to read this great quote that I came across. Future. The existence of God's, okay, who wrote this? I guess I did. The future. The existence of God's possibilities, which at present can only be seen as that which is to come. Let me read that again. The future is the existence of God's possibilities, the existence of possibilities, which right now can only be seen as that which is to come. There's so many possibilities out there. And let's step out. Let's step out into them and see what God is going to do through us. Amen. Thank you for your support. I forgot to say that. I just have so many other things to say. But thank you for your support. Do you know this church has supported me in my ministry for my entire career? My entire career. This is the very first church that took up my support in 1988. The very first church. Wow. So that's really awesome. Thank you for supporting me. Thank you for supporting other missionaries. Thank you for being a part of my journey. And here's to another 5 years. Woohoo! Okay. That's the Africa thing, by the way.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Nancy. Appreciate that. I was thinking as she is sharing this morning the reference, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. How true that is, isn't it? You know, Nancy will walk places that we never think of going to or never have the opportunity to go to. And when I look at what she does in the HIV training, in that part of the world especially, it's such a need. It is such a need. Where Jill and I lived in Moscow on Leninsky Prospect, Leninsky Boulevard, you would have lined up probably 3 miles every 100 feet another gal waiting just to be picked up, and there'd be cars waiting in line to pick them up. Incredible. Incredible. And our kids walked that every day, and they'd see all this. And it's such an epidemic and such a challenge. And then to willingly walk into that area of ministry, what I would call darkness. I mean, to walk into that area of ministry is incredible. You know, I look at some of what she does, and I kind of think, wow, I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that. And yet that's what her heart is. That's what her ministry is. I think that's pretty impressive. I think it's pretty impressive. As we get ready to receive the second offering, a couple things I want to say. And if you're a guest with us today, and this is your first time ever, please understand what our policy is as a church. Whatever comes in this offering, everything that comes in this offering, 100% goes to Nancy. We as a church do not take out 1 penny from this offering. I want you to know that, because I've been in places before and just growing up in church where offerings were received and it didn't always go to what you thought it would be going to, and they take out administration, or we take out 0. It goes to Nancy and her ministry. So whatever you give today will go to her ministry. Now, if you didn't come prepared to give today, on our webpage, and we have Wi-Fi available, but on our webpage we have an app. And for today, Nancy's name's on there. And you can... Oh, missionary guest. Okay, sorry, Nancy, your name's not on there. But she is the missionary guest for today. So if you want to give specifically, you can do that on our web, on our app for smart devices. So you can still have an opportunity to give. If you didn't come prepared and you don't do the smart devices and you still want to, you can give it this week yet at the church office, and we'll make sure it goes to her. But everything that comes in for Nancy will go to Nancy. We want you to know that. You can make your checks payable to First Assembly, because this offering will be totally separate from any other offering, and it will 100% go to Nancy, one check for her and her ministry overseas. And so I'm going to invite the ushers, if you will come at this time, and we're going to receive this offering. As we receive the offering, we're going to pray for Nancy. We're going to pray as a church that God would bless her and strengthen her. You know, Jill and I talked this last week about the missionaries overseas, and it's Thanksgiving, and we saw some of our Facebook friends, and they're gathering together of small groups of families for Thanksgiving overseas, and sometimes you couldn't even find the turkey. You know, you just couldn't find the turkey, let alone the pumpkin pie. And you can keep turkey, give me the pumpkin pie, but you couldn't find that. So, but they give up a lot in missions, and they don't. It's not because they're sacrificed. They're not martyrs, and they don't want to assume that. They give it up because it's just where God's calling them to be. It's where God calls them to be. And so I'm just delighted and honored to be able to partner with her in ministry. And Nancy, it's nice to hear. I didn't know that we're the first ever. It's like, I wanted to do this. We're the first. Yeah. And so we really do value Nancy and her ministry. So we're going to pray for her, and we're going to pray that God would bless both the gift that you give, that it would just reach the need, and that God would bless you for your faithfulness in giving, because sometimes that even is a sacrifice. You're giving sacrificially, and we want to pray God's blessing on you. Let's pray together. Father, I thank you today just for Nancy's presentation, her sharing her heart. And really, we got to see this journey as she shared of her heart and her story, even the difficult times that she went through, and how that she took those difficult times, and rather than wallowing in self-pity and saying, why me, she used it as an opportunity to learn and prepare for what was in the journey ahead. And Lord, I so admire that. That's a characteristic you just love to see in people. A willingness to say, okay, here's what's been thrown at me. I'm gonna hit this thing out of the park and keep going. And so, Lord, I'm blessed by that.